Welcome to Our Justice Journey, a podcast designed to educate others on how to fight for social justice as youth and beyond. Today, we'll be interviewing social justice warrior Dr. Lawrence Winn. Dr. Lawrence Winn is an assistant professor of teaching and education in the School of Education at the University of California, Davis, and the co-founder and executive director of the Transformative Justice and Education Center. His program of research examines critical consciousness and social capital in and out of school learning spaces and transformative justice pedagogy and practice within schools. A trained ethnographer, Dr. Winn is interested in the relationship and dynamics between historically marginalized communities of color and schools, nonprofits, and government entities such as police, elected officials, and more. Dr. Winn was a member of the Race to Equity team, which published the Race to Equity Report, a comprehensive study on racial disparities in education, criminal justice, workforce, and healthcare for Black and white families in Dane County, Wisconsin. He is the co-author of articles that have appeared in Theory into Practice, Race and Social Problems in Adolescent Research Review. He has a wide background in many different avenues, such as a master's in divinity, a law degree, a bachelor's of arts, along with a PhD in human ecology. On a day-to-day basis, he enjoys spending time with his two sons, reading, and discussing current events. In today's podcast, Dr. Lawrence Winn will discuss different avenues of making change and how that has affected his work. From his work to his everyday life, he's an admirable scholar activist, and we are pleased to have the opportunity to learn from him today. So thank you for joining us. Our first question is, do you believe that there is one pathway to do social justice work that is most influential?
Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me to your space and to share my knowledge and also to learn from you. So I'm excited about this time I will spend with you today and to build. So is there one path? Uh, no, I think there's many different paths that can influence an individual. Um, to me, when I think about a path to social justice, I think about somebody's heart. I think about if there is a person who has a certain characteristic about them or characteristics. One person is loving, cares about other individuals, is compassionate, is a fighter, and wants to see this world a better place. And when I think about social justice, I think about the different uh, avenues or different careers, such as being an educator, being a nurse, being a minister, uh, being an attorney, you name it, just being a good person and making sure you put people first.
Yes, definitely. Our next question is, what was a book that you read when you were young that greatly impacted you and why?
A book that I read that greatly impacted me. That's hard because I am an avid reader. I love to read books. I mean, it depends on the day, it depends on the year. I mean, I can go down the list. I mean, since today is MLK Day, where do we go from here? One of his last writings, just thinking about the state of America. Since, I'm a theologian as well, I think about James Cone, Black theology and Black power. I think about uh, uh, David Walker's appeal. I think about writings from Angela Davis. I think about George Jackson. The list is just hard for me when I think about a book. Um, but if I had to pick one book that has influenced me, it probably would be, David Walker's Appeal, just because it's a book that I read that came out of the blue.
Mm-hmm.
And the book is basically about this free brother, this African American,
Mm-hmm.
who wrote a letter about the importance of freedom for Black folks, and the way he went about strategizing and making sure everybody had this letter, and what it meant to be free was just amazing. And I thought I read every book, but when I read this book, it just blew me out the water. And so David Walker's Appeal was a book that really, really influenced me. Also, Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. So when you think about social justice and
Mm-hmm.
you think about the fight, I think about Blood in My Eye by George Jackson. Because again, it's you talk about Angela Davis and the work she's been able to do over the years. You see her influence on George Jackson when he was incarcerated, and then for this brother to be able to write a book about what it means to be incarcerated, what it means to be a freedom fighter, and so those two books influenced me.
Yeah, it's very deep. I resonate with the one you were just talking about too, because I read one of my favorite books, is the autobiography of Malcolm X. And when I read that, it was like him talking about Elijah Muhammad and hearing all this stuff.
Hmm.
He was incarcerated and then him coming out and, making like this big change and all that stuff. So I just,
Yeah, Malcolm X was. I mean, if there's one book, it's Malcolm X. But I didn't want to pick Malcolm X because that is the go-to book. The Malcolm X was the first book that I actually read that was really thick
Mhm.
when I was in seventh grade, and I never forget. I went to the local library, I picked it up, and I just ran through that book. I couldn't put it down, and there's a part where Malcolm X is talking about when Elijah Muhammad was excommunicated, or Malcolm X was excommunicated in
Mhm.
Phoenix, Arizona, and that's where I'm from. So when I read that, like, oh, and then there's history of Nation Islam in Phoenix, so I was excited. But yeah, Malcolm X was just an unbelievable book, and it's that's the book. So yeah,
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah, I thought that book was also so just amazing, especially for young people, just because it shows him, coming from so young and then like his transformation and like,
Hmm.
coming from jail and then going to the Nation of Islam and just going to Africa, and, all these things into who he
Hmm.
became today, and I feel like people can really resonate with that because it's like you can come from anywhere and be
Hmm.
like a social justice freedom fighter and make a big change.
You know what? And this is the problem. You asked me what is my favorite book, and
Mhm.
it depends. I said earlier, it depends on uh, the day, the week, the year, the month. Uh, I received my BA in English, so I love reading, and I mentioned theology, so the James Combs and social justice, and I mentioned Malcolm X and George Jackson, but I also think about what makes me caring about other folks. Toni Morrison, any book written by Toni Morrison, you talk about what it means to be human and the bluest eye. And I just think about Tar Baby, so I guess my favorite book may be something else, but my favorite writer of all time is Toni Morrison. That's what it means to be human. You talk about the
Yeah.
gut, the soul of an individual. So that's a hard question.
Yeah, it is, it is. Yeah, I remember I read, like, her book, I'm blanking on the name right now, but it was, like, Others or, like, Othering or that was
Oh yes. Hmm.
yeah, and
Yeah,
this I know I always use that in papers now, like, this construct of othering and all this stuff, it's
yeah,
really
yeah. She's
impactful.
really big. Yeah, she was talking about social justice, and you didn't even know she was talking about social justice just because she was talking about anti-blackness. She
Mhm.
was talking about what it means to dehumanize an individual. So Toni Morrison was always ahead of her time.
Yeah. So our next question is, if you can think back to when you were in high school, what advice would you give to your younger self?
Back to high school, what advice? I was so focused and determined uh, to get into college just because of my background.
Mhm.
And so, grades were important, and I always value human relationships. But in order for me to do what I did, I had to sacrifice participating in other areas,
Mhm.
other activities. One of the things I look back and for my two sons, uh, that I encourage them to do is just to explore, get outside your comfort zone.
Yeah.
For example, I wish I would have participated in acting or some play, not become like a thespian, but at least play one role in one of the plays within my high school.
Yeah.
Uh, I wish I would have participated in a different sport besides basketball, like learn how to golf or play volleyball with a different group.
Mhm.
Uh, and it was just so much pressure to excel in the what I wanted to become. But I think looking back, just been open to different opportunities and just expanding outside of my comfort zone.
Mhm.
So, if it's theater, if it's the arts, if it's, saying going into spoken word, not being a rapper, but just trying to spit some poetry, that would have been cool for me. So yeah, just getting out of my comfort zone.
Yeah, I definitely resonate with that. My mom always tries to tell me, if she could look back, she would kind of say the same thing. So I always try to keep that in mind, and at least in the back of my head.
For example, just learning a second language. I chose Latin in high school because Latin was going to help me with my SAT. That's what I
Mhm.
was told, right? So I excelled in Latin, honors AP in Latin. But why didn't I take like Spanish?
We thank you for listening to part one of Our Justice Journey with Dr. Lawrence Winn. To further listen to this discussion, feel free to visit part two.